Hi, everybody. Welcome to this evening's event. First of all, congratulations to Hélène Le Teno on a wonderful film, an inspiring film, a really informative film. We're going to be joined shortly by a panel, but first of all, I just want to acknowledge the French Embassy in Ireland's organisation of the event with the Alliance Française, the Institut Français, and of course, Cork Film Festival. Where I'd love to introduce the panel to you now. Grace Maher is an organic grower from Carlow, County Carlow, where she runs a horticultural business, is involved in education, and she's also a development officer with the Organic Association. Karen O'Donoghue is Director of Development at Grow It Yourself, and she's also co-presenter of RT's Grow, Cook, Eat. And Hélène Le Teno, who you will have seen in the film and numerous appearances in the film, is joining us from Paris. And Hélène is director of the Thorel Institute. And what I would love to start with you, Hélène, and you're going to talk about SOS, Group SOS, who you worked with before. But I'd love you to actually tell us, given that the film was shot in 2017, where are these projects at now that we saw in the film?
Yeah, thanks a lot to Johnny for the introduction. Obviously, I was very happy to join this evening to have the chance to listen to all your questions. And one of the first questions might be is, where are these farms now and these farmers? And so good news, the first good news is that the farm that we see in the movie, especially the one on the old airport, is currently running under production, and there are a couple of young farmers who have started the production there, and they are delivering fresh vegetables to Paris, direct to the customers, but also through the platforms like À l'Ancienne, who was set up by Paul, that you could see also in the movie. So I would say that this farm project on the airport was a success because it's running properly right now. And we are very, very happy that we could do that after a long struggle, as you might have seen in that movie. Our plan was to have maybe 5 or 10 other farms in the short term on the same model in other regions in France. And I'm sad to say that we have not reached that many big farms around France because of funding issues. So saying it in short, the movie highlights very well 2 key factors for agroecological development, which is people, trained people, and funding and proper funding models. And I think the 2 are equally difficult. So on funding, I'm quite positive with platforms like Bluebees for crowdfunding. And for training people, we have tested formats of companionship since then. So training companions on a set of farms during 1 year so that they can discover new practices and then feel it easier to install themselves on the new farm. So that's where we stand now.
Good. I was particularly taken with Vincent, who was a commercial farmer, who he was at 14, he had been poisoned with gramoxone, and he was going to be working with Xavier.
And
did that project progress?
Yeah, that's a very difficult story because we had found a person that you can see in the movie at some point who wanted to install himself and develop his project on the farm of Vincent. And unfortunately, that person died a couple of months after the movie. So that was obviously a very painful story. And even for Vincent, who was hoping to have somebody on his side to change the practices on his farm. And that's also somehow some very tragic stories from the countryside everywhere in France and probably in some other countries, of loneliness, of difficult lives, of hard work, and sometimes of sickness or even death, which is not, I hope, for the future.
No, and Vincent speaks about that in the film. Vincent talks about his neighbor who is suffering from depression and 2 neighbors. for people watching, France is currently at about 7.5% organic production. I'd love to go to Grace Maher now in Carlow, town close to my heart. I grew up near there. And Grace, you've obviously been involved in the sector for a long time. Could you give people an idea where Ireland is at? I know that Austria is at over 20%. So France at 7.5%, Ireland, and Austria 20% production. Could you give us an idea of the Irish situation, please?
Thanks, Johnny. Well, our story is not so good in terms of where we're at in organics. Ireland is at 2.4% of utilisable agricultural land area certified organic. And that's about 118,000 hectares, which is roughly about 1,900 farms are certified organic. So we're well below the European average in that context. As I said, 2.4%, the European average is 7.5%. So France is certainly in line with the European average. And unfortunately in Ireland, currently we aren't. But obviously, you know, there's plans and an ambition to actually increase that. And realistically, you know, I'd love to see us up about 7 to 10% within the next decade, because really we do have to kind of shift, and we've got to adopt more organic farming in Ireland to put a little bit of credibility behind the green image of Ireland as a green food producing country.
Great. And if we could go to Karen now. Karen, people will know your face from the TV. From Grow, Cook, Eat, and but you're also involved in working with people in growing your own food, grow it yourself, and you're director of development with that organization. Could you tell us how that's going?
Gladly, yeah. So God, isn't it great? And hello everybody, to be a little bit dressed up on a random Tuesday evening. Happy days. So yes, GIY has had an incredible last 12 months, but really a very amazing 12 years. And no more than a lot of the people in the film this evening, you know, started by someone who had that Damascus moment, you know, light bulb, garlic bulb moment of the fact that the food choices he was making didn't make sense anymore, and set about to change it. So GIY, just to put it in a little bit of context, our absolute mission is to help as many people as possible to grow as much food wherever they can. And in lots and lots of ways to help people, give them the knowledge they feel they don't have, reassure them that they do have the time and they do have the space, and we'll help them with the know-how. And it's fantastic. I have to say the last 12 months, as a result of COVID, brought a lot of people our way, because everybody finally had, albeit in the most difficult of circumstances, an opportunity to slow down and start, you know, a hobby, or learn how to grow as something they've wanted to do for a very long time. And increasingly we noticed over the last few months that what started off as maybe a little bit of a COVID distraction, or a bit of homeschooling, actually became a long-term commitment to food, because we were increasingly aware of actually just how fragile our food system is. That, you know, we talk about having incredible food security here in Ireland, and that's only one version of the statistics. I also think that increasingly people in this lockdown place became ever more aware of the importance of community, green spaces within their community. When you think about how our, you know, ability to move and travel was really unnecessarily limited, we certainly had people becoming aware of what was quite literally on their doorstep. So those two things have helped people consider food and growing food in a completely new light.
And, you know, in terms of people, the consumer or the citizens, you know, in terms of their appetite for going to organic, has there been a noticeable shift there?
Yeah, interesting. So I can't speak hugely to a shift in retail figures. What I would say is that one of the key messages around GIY, or from GIY, is that when you grow some of your own food, and I literally mean herbs in a container, salads on your windowsill, or whatever you can access outdoors, you develop what we call food empathy. So you reconnect with your food, and then you just start thinking about it differently. You place it higher up your value chain. You will naturally understand the need to spend more money on it. And everything that we're told in the current food production chain suddenly doesn't make as much sense anymore. So let's face it, when we look at food and food available to us in Ireland, the abnormal has become normal. You can pretty much get what you want when you want, with very little reference to or consideration for the seasons. We have become accustomed to and lazy about cheap food. You know, you can buy, you know, bunches of carrots or heads of cabbages or whatever it might be at like a ridiculous price that clearly gives no real cost to the actual value it took to produce it, nor indeed takes into mind the farmer who produced it or the land from which it came. So we get fooled into this false sense of food security and good value for money, and, you know, eat your 5 a day, etc., etc. But nobody ever really behind the big marketing happy farmer on the gate, you know, tells us the reality of the food that we're buying, the fact that the nutritional value of the food that we eat is directly determined by the quality of the soil in which it's grown, or the number of miles it had to travel to get into your home. Yeah. So I don't think people even know to think about local food or seasonal foods, never mind organic. But now is absolutely the time to help educate and inform and inspire.
Yeah, and to go back to production then, because one of the things that you realize if you grow some of your own food, that it is quite labor intensive. And it's something that Hélène refers to in the film, that you know, they're in one of the discussions that they're talking about creating 30,000 more jobs, because, you know, so the transition to this way of producing food, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves, let's face it, you know. But if you could all kind of address yourself to that, but maybe we start with Hélène, because, you know, you're looking at models of social farming. You were involved with.
Definitely, that was the reason why we thought that this association, Ferme d'Avenir, could be helped and developed better within a large social business called SOS Group, because this type of social business have a rule which is looking for positive impact first and seeing the profit or the money as a way to get this impact and not the reverse. We have been researching a lot different types of social business farming models, including the governance of the farm. So it more or less looks like cooperatives. I don't know the word that we could use in Ireland, but different types of businesses, with a specific governance of who is owning the shares and who is owning the voting rights, so that the decisions can be made on a basis where everybody can vote, and not only shareholders or not only the financial players. And that was decisive in the success of this farm on the airport, because the co-funders were also the co-founders, who were both the farmers and the customers of this farm, including restaurants or retailers, but smaller size retailers to keep short distribution circuits.
Yes.
So that's the sum of this social business model plus permaculture design principles, which are make it easy and copy and mimic the nature, if I put it shortly, which helped us to make these models of farms at a small size. Never look for bigger farms, because you cannot, with your arms and with your legs, walk for a very large distance. So it has to be close to your farm and your residence. So what else about social business? The current projects we are working on is a mix of social positive impact and organic farming, and that's designing residence for people with severe autism. And we know there is a strong link between what we eat and mental health. So one way of making people feel better is changing their food. And also one way of helping them feel better in the society is maybe for some of them to work on farms. So we are working on a combination of autism residents and organic farming right now. Together with Helen Medig, the movie maker. That's what the project we're leading now.
Wonderful. And I say to people watching that if you want to send in comments or questions, please do. I can see them in the chat here. So Grace, you know, fine arable farming down in Carlow. When you kind of look around your neighbors there, do you sense there's an increasing openness to what you're doing?
Yeah, it is very good agricultural land in Carlow, exactly. And I suppose, you know, for me watching the film, I've been involved in organic agriculture for, you know, the last 2 decades in Ireland, and so much of the film resonated with my own experiences, you know, in terms of the farmer's experience, the farmer looking over the hedge, and a lot of the farmers I work with as well, because working in the Irish Organic Association, I obviously work with a wide range of farmers. So that concept of, you know, neighbours initially being skeptical about farms converting to organic, and then slowly the farmer looking over the hedge to see how it was being managed. Like, all of those are very real aspects and probably very real barriers in terms of conversion rates to organic farming. But in terms of the, you know, because obviously the film focuses on horticulture, and certainly, you know, we're probably running into a major crisis in horticulture in Ireland, in organic and conventional, in having access to labour. And I was very interested to know that the farmer was, you know, in the movie was paying 19 euros an hour for people to work on the farm. And I mean, having access to, and, you know, to labour is a major issue. And obviously one of the principles of organic farming is, you know, the principle of care and fairness, and paying people a fair wage for a fair day's work is one of the core principles. And I do think, you know, it's undervalued. Fruit and vegetables are gone too cheap in terms of access. Again, what Karen has said, I mean, organic and non-organic, and the kind of, you know, the film touches on the idea of the externalities of, you know, food production, and how, you know, we may be paying cheaper prices at the supermarket, but we're paying for them in other ways in terms of water quality, air quality, biodiversity loss, all of those kind of, you know, public services that organic farming in particular can deliver on. So, you know, from my experience being involved in horticulture as well, in the Irish Organic Association, we're running a 3-year project called MOPS, which is Maximising Organic Production Systems. So we're working very closely with 11 growers all across Ireland. And we're looking at things on the farm like cost of production, like labour. And it's very interesting to see, because some of those farms in the MOPS project would be maybe, you know, one in Galway, for instance, Beach Lawn Organic Farm. It's 28 hectares, the farm, but it employs 14 people. So when we're looking at the concept of labour, I mean, yes, organic fruit and vegetables is far more labour intensive, but, you know, I think the film very nicely portrayed, you know, the equation of having people who may want access, you know, to jobs, and offering them potential work on farms, which obviously then impacts positively on rural communities. So certainly, I think there's been a lot of aspects of the film that resonate with how, you know, organic farming has developed in Ireland, and also to look at the future challenges. I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the current pandemic, and you know, are we sleepwalking into another crisis in terms of, you know, economics? And there is, you know, from an Irish perspective, you asked the question earlier, Johnny, about you know, consumer interest in organics in Ireland, and there's statistics from Borbia which show last year there was an increase in sales of fruit and vegetables, organic, between 30 and 40%. So the demand is huge and is growing. So consumers have made that connection. They've joined the dots. They want more organic produce, and we're currently importing 70% of what's sold in Ireland. Like, again, in your film, Helena, where you were looking at the import levels. So we do need to get a little bit more realistic about looking at, you know, substituting those imports that could be produced in Ireland. Obviously, again, we can't do the bananas or pineapples here either, but there are plenty of options. I mean, for Irish grown organic produce.
And seasonal, you know, consuming more food that's in season, you know, that surely we can get there. I mean, one of the things, just for the people watching it, and the panelists might know something about this, one of the things they're talking about, and this relates to the cost of production that Grace is referring to, which is in the UK during the Brexit, when they're talking about shifting public money towards public good, rather than the current EU model of public money for a lot of practices that aren't particularly good, producing a lot of fossil fuel-based food, moving hedgerows. There's things like agroforestry are not incentivized currently under the current cap arrangements, which they're looking at in Britain at incentivizing. So, Karen, did you want to come in on that question, just on that labor intensity question? If you had anything to add on that.
I mean, I can't speak to it to the same degree as the other two women, but I think what we're noticing in GIY is, because one of the factors in the program there talked about businesses, and we do a lot of work with businesses and employee well-being programs, and also as a way to engage people in sustainability. And what we found is that increasingly people of all ages want to work in a job that has real purpose, that actually resonates with their values, whether they're new values as a result of films like this or whatever. And okay, we can't all, give up our jobs and move to the country just like that. And let's not romanticize it. Anybody that has spent a day lugging soil and picking rocks and shifting compost and all that jazz in a November rain, it's not glamorous. But my God, you go to bed knowing that your body has done what it's meant to do, and that you're actively involved in producing good food. So I think that there's people who will want to change their work or their career. There will be an awful lot of people, there are a lot of people needing to do the same. And I think what we need to be clear about is, okay, how can we accommodate and support that with training, the like of what Grace is doing, inviting well-established farmers, excuse me, to come out from behind the farm gate, but only if they're willing to be honest, open, and willing to embrace change, and with that change to bring in people with varying degrees of skills, but who are happy to learn what to do. So I don't quite know how it would work, but it does seem bonkers to think that there's a mass of people, willing labor to a degree, ready to move into a sector that we need that consistent people power for. But it's just a way to doing it fair. And what I found interesting actually in the movie, in the film, was how farming was referred to as a profession, which I have to admit, I never thought of it in that way. I never used the word profession, but I actually really think of it as a vocation. So again, let's not romanticize it like it's a business. It has, like any business, that has to wash its own face, but it can't be run in a way that it costs the earth. It has to be a more considered approach.
There was an extraordinary statistic in the film, which I think, Hélène, you mentioned, which is that 525,000 farmers, maybe 575,000 farmers in France, half of them are going to retire by 2025.
That's scary. I think that's really scary. When we found it out, we were like, oh, what are we going to eat tomorrow? No more good sausages, no more fruits. We will get industrial rubbish, and that's what we are starting to have, indeed. So there are two effects. I think the first is simply the shape of what we call the pyramid of ages, which is inverted. More older people than younger people. So that's in any sector. But if you addition to that the fact that people tend to go to the big cities to find jobs, which they sometimes do not find. you have countryside that are growing empty, and the reverse movement is just starting. It's very little. It's a couple of people, as you said, Karen, that some of them want to, some of them have to, and have no other choice. In both cases, they don't get the proper training, and that's where we got, is that that's not a job that you can learn into 2 months time or even 6 months time. That's a lifetime that you need to learn to be a proper farmer. So we have lost lots of knowledge, and so replacing these 500,000 people cannot be done even in 3 or 5 years time. So that's why we were doing some advocacy about that, telling the government that without any proper program, this will not happen by itself. Maybe 500 people, 5,000 people, but not 500,000 people. So, and I think there is no clear political vision of how could this be desirable, if it's good for the society or not. Most of the large public investments are made on huge cities, you know, for big construction works, smart city, etc. And very, very little goes to proper farming and rural development when we look closely.
Yeah, and the film touches on aspects of the importance of forestry as well, and diverse forestry for carbon capture, but also in terms of that opening scene where they're looking at the soil, the quality of the soil. I know a lot of work has been done on grasslands, on diversifying grasslands, which can be used for greater carbon capture. And I would like to discuss the kind of wider climate issue now.
It's that's where I'm more optimistic. Is some of the young people from Ferme d'Avenir went to do some regen agriculture in Greece. That's regenerative agriculture. It seems to work really fine when it's done properly, but it needs again people and money to do so. When I look at Brittany, my home country in the west of France, the landscapes have been completely destroyed. The soils are ugly and poor, and the rivers are polluted. So I think it's the same in Ireland. I don't know, but I guess it's more or less the same. Again, it's a lot more than 5 years to restore all this natural capital. And I think we can only do that if it comes from the heart. That's where I stand now. Is if you don't feel it, you don't do it. It's not only a technical issue. What I'm meaning is it's not only about good practices in agriculture. It's whether or not we feel that we have to do it.
I could just address the wider climate issue before it's not dealt with in the film, but before I came on this evening, I checked on Electricity Map, and 60% of France's energy tonight is being created by nuclear energy. And we're building an interconnector between Ireland and France, and we will be exchanging energy in a few years. We'll be sending you our excess wind energy, and France will be sending us nuclear energy through the Celtic interconnector, which should be hitting land not too far from you, Karen, in the next couple of years. And so there's, there are kind of, I suppose, controversial aspects to the climate issue, but one of the things that's been happening in France, like we would have been watching the Gilets jaunes movement, but I noticed that there's actually climate conferences going on at local level in France in the last couple of years, that there is a local response to climate.
I would say not enough. Certainly not enough. Because there's a lot of blah blah, a lot of talk, a lot of debates. Well, French people like to debate, but when it comes to doing stuff, there are less people on the ground. So when you see the young people sitting down, one of the bridge over the Seine in Paris with Extinction Rebellion, they are making a sit-in for a couple of days. So that's a strong symbol, but they have no real power anyhow. So the question is whether or not we reinvest into a green economy, a green agriculture and green energy, and who is doing that, and how many billion of euros do we really invest into that. So Maxime, the guy that you see in the movie, the main character of the movie, he left Ferme d'Avenir more than 1 year ago to start a new challenge about trees. His view is that without trees, we will not get it. So, especially for climate change, we need to plant trees everywhere in the countryside and to adapt the forest as well, because the forest is very vulnerable to climate change. So his new and fresh idea is to develop tree shelters baby trees. I don't know the word for that anyway. Small tree plants that will be resilient and adapted to climate change. So he's looking for large donors for this tree planting program. I hope he will find some. Yeah.
Yes, and trees are an issue in Ireland. We're only at 11%, but great. So, Karen, would you like to come in on that?
Just an observation, really, and a little bit of a share regarding, climate issues and small communities. So I live in an area called Lisquinlan in East Cork, in an incredibly beautiful part of the world. We've got the Garryvoe Beach, we've got the Ballycotton Cliffs, Knockadoon Walk. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And very recently, an application was made by a business person to set up an industrial-sized pig factory, just as the crow flies a few fields over that way. And it seemed like an impossible thing to object against, or at least kind of get some sense of awareness within the community. But actually what has happened is local people, some of whom knew each other, most of whom didn't, came together. And like, we've submitted an objection, we're fundraising, we're getting the reports needed, etc. And we've got incredible support. And I think that's an example of how once upon a time, the objections might have been put in based on the smell, which, to be fair, there's 4,500 pigs in phase 1, generating 7 million litres of pig slurry per annum to be spread on fields in the area that are already used for the dairy farmers. Okay, imagine 700 million litres of pig slurry.
Right.
So beforehand, the reason I say this is that, it would have been kind of a very disparate group of people, and it would have been right on their doorstep. But actually what I'm finding incredible is there's huge support and engagement for us, we're called Power, because people really get the desperate impact this pig factory, this proposed factory, will have on our social, economic and environmental area. Like on all three aspects. And I think people in general, and this is a lovely David versus Goliath story, and I hope we'll be successful. And there are lots of them happening all over our country and all over our world, but there must be more. Because I think local people need to remember, or people in general, means we have the power, our money in our back pocket. We can choose with our feet and choose how we spend our cash. And that demand will change supplies. But we also have people power in our communities. And if we don't want, mass agriculture and, all of this kind of stuff, we can stop it.
Yeah, there's some lovely comments coming in. A very inspiring film. Thanks. I don't know who said that, but thanks for your comment. Merci pour ce film, another comment, and thought-provoking film. Thank you. So if you could, we'll get that back to the director, get those messages back to the director. Grace, looking at the situation in Ireland, the wider climate issues, do you feel, and obviously, we have a government now with green participation, but do you feel that there is a kind of a readiness to shift on this wider climate issue?
The short answer or the long answer. I suppose, connecting to the film, there was a lot of, the overarching message for me coming from the film, which I'll relate back to, the situation in Ireland, is the immediacy in which we have to act, and I think if you touch on some of the issues that were mentioned in the film, I love the older gentleman who said that, humans collectively, we do so much damage, we're a terrible species. And I actually think that encapsulates everything about the film and about the actual climate crisis that we're now approaching. And I think, we look at, I suppose how organic farming can benefit many aspects of the environment, delivers on public goods, cleaner water, less emissions, greenhouse gases, less nutrient emissions, obviously less pesticide consumption. And the main thing for me tends to be biodiversity, the impact it has on biodiversity. So yes, organic farming has loads of potential. One of the major problems is globally, only 1.4% of land is farmed organically on a global basis. So, you know, and all of the climate crisis is a global issue, because we can obviously talk about regions, we can talk about countries, we can pat ourselves on the back, we can slap ourselves across the face, whichever approach we want to take. But this, you know, the crisis that we're facing into doesn't recognize national boundaries or accents or whatever. And I think, you know, when you look at where we're positioned, you know, from an organic food point of view, and there's loads of positive things about conventional agriculture too. And what Helena mentioned earlier about the family farm situation is not the same in Ireland. In Ireland, we're in a really positive place in terms of we've got lots of young people who want to get into farming, and that's been kind of, you know, the hedgerows are still in a good position in Ireland. So there's lots of positives about conventional farming in Ireland. But if we are to look, you know, at policy, and I think the film nicely interacts with government, with policymakers. And I think one of the key messages for me in the film was, I think it was the Minister for Agriculture in France, when Max went to speak to him, and he said, you know, the long-term future, the big picture stuff often doesn't get translated into policy. And I think, you know, if you combine, you know, the biodiversity crisis, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which 197 countries have signed up to globally, you know, agriculture directly impacts on 8 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And you know, 2020 to 2030 has been nominated as the decade of action. And obviously then the pandemic happened. So, you know, we are in danger of sidelining the climate crisis. And I think the next 10 years, I know the film is 20, it talks about 20 years, but the next 10 years will be crucial. And I think, you know, again, you look at other aspects like the ITBES report on biodiversity and ecosystem services, and, you know, 1 million species looking to be, you know, to be made extinct within the next decade. So I think we really need, and I really love this aspect about the film, we really need to reach out to industry, we need to reach out to farmers, researchers, civil society, you know, and politicians, and engage them in this transformation process that really needs to happen. And, you know, it reflects on, I'm just going to, it's not your movie, but this, you know, this book, you know, David Attenborough's, the message he's been shouting about, the film on Netflix. Like, I think, you know, he really nicely encapsulated, and for me, it resonated quite strongly in the film, was the time to act is now. I mean, we need to engage everybody in this process, because, you know, there is no plan B, there's no planet B, and we are running out of time. So a major transformation, in my opinion, needs to happen, and needs to happen quickly, you know.
Well, you kind of answered the question that someone sent in, but maybe Karen and Hélène would like to answer it. The panel feel hopeful that change will happen in time.
Hélène?
Yeah, I would like to answer yes. I have to say that from what I see in France here, the answer is probably no. So for many reasons, I wrote a paper a couple of weeks ago when the pandemic began, which is a pandemic brings a lot of issues about purchasing power for many people. And with the purchasing power going down, people are even more reluctant to buy more expensive food, even if they would like to. So even though some organic retail stores made a good performance during the pandemic, right now the situation is that so many people already lost their jobs that they probably will not be able to buy good food for the coming months. In addition to that, when you get into difficult times, it's not only economic troubles that you get, it's also social troubles. So any type of midterm and long-term planning gets more difficult. And that's what Grace was saying, is in a political perspective, we are very far from reaching any type of consensus at the social level. So I'm more confident into local initiatives, as Karen said. That's what we see in some areas in France, is local initiatives to redevelop the rural areas, including organic farming, but not only, including wooden constructions, green energies. But the sum of these small initiatives so far is not enough to curb the trends that we are seeing right now. So I'm realistically pessimistic Tonight, I would like to say something funny, but really honestly, what I see is not very promising. Yeah.
It often requires a crisis for things to really shift, you know, and in some ways we're looking at crisis in the face, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really feel that we need to get more climate troubles, more extreme weather events, more drought, more fires, more pandemic, more invasive species, and more problems in agriculture, and more health issues before we finally turn down to what's really important, is taking care of what is alive.
Yeah. Karen?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I mean, I'm generally an optimist, and my children and I, our family motto is there is always a solution. So, like, I want to answer the question with that energy, but the reality is, I think we may have left it too late. Can we catch up? I hope so, but only if everybody stops talking about what we need to do and starts actioning that. And by everybody, I mean the four of us. We can all do better. Everybody watching the film, everybody watching this conversation now, because if we keep talking about them, when they fix it, when they change, when they, the government, this, that, the other, like all we're doing is, you know, when you talk about pointing the finger, you need to look at the three pointing back. And so my head would be melted and my energy's gone if I try to impact big macro level change. I'm not a good dramatic. I wouldn't last 2 minutes in that situation. So when I look at what's not happening at that level, then my answer is no, I'm not hopeful. But all I need to do is look at my local community, look at local community gardens like the Zero Waste Rath Coffee Garden, who are just a bunch of ordinary people doing the most extraordinary things and producing incredible organic food, little micro enterprises with a cottage market, like all of that. When I see that at the bottom of an estate in Clane in County Kildare, and I see what can be done when it's led by an 83-year-old Pat Pender and there's children rocking into that garden on a regular basis, then I feel hopeful. In fact, I feel more than hopeful. I feel absolutely resolute, which is a different ballgame altogether. So a mixed answer.
It's the most fundamental thing, isn't it? You know, creating our own shelter, but creating our own food. It's something that is within our reach, you know, whether we live in cities or in rural areas. So there's a question in, do you think the COVID crisis has meant that the climate crisis has taken a back seat? How can we tackle this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Grace, you think it's taken a back seat?
Yes, I agree. Actually, I do think that the pandemic has pushed, you know, and you know, the climate crisis into the background a little bit, which is a pity because obviously they're so interconnected. And you can see some, you know, we all saw in the early days of the first lockdown, you know, pictures of aviation reduction and how it impacted positively on the climate crisis. So yes, unfortunately, I think it does. And I think, you know, to echo what Helena and Karen have said, you know, I mean, I think you know, it is majorly important. And I think, you know, when we look into the future, yes, you know, we need policy coming from above, and we need, you know, grassroots action as well, but we do need them to meet in the middle and not miss each other. And as somebody who kind of is involved in this again for, as I said, you know, quite a long time, watching movies like that, like the movie, actually does inspire me, you know what I mean? And I think we all kind of need that as well. We need to kind of see like real situations, how people are adapting. And I do think, you know, we look at, you know, as being part of Europe, we're looking like, in, you know, the European Green Deal is looking at reducing pesticide use by 50% by 2030, and increasing organic farming to 25% across European land area by 2030. So there is positive initiatives that are happening, but it's related to the previous question, how quickly that they will happen. Is it going to be in time? And I think they're kind of interconnected. And I suppose, you know, if one thing we can learn from the pandemic is to really look at how quickly society can change when it needs to change, and hopefully we could shift that into more of a focus on the climate and act positively in that context.
I might let Hélène in on this now. Hélène, do you think the climate crisis has taken a back seat during COVID?
Yeah, I think it's really different whether you speak to different types of people. If I'm more precise, I meet dozens of young people who would like to get a purposeful job, whatever it means, and they are really looking for it, and they don't want to resign to any other type of stupid job that we have done before. So seeing that, I'm quite happy that they will be part of a solution somehow from what they do in their daily life, in their jobs, and not on a political level. My personal opinion is that the politics usually follow the society. They are not able to take one step forward before. The shortfall of all the climate negotiation, the fact that you try to make many people get an agreement at a very large level, is the opposite of what tells all the theories about environment. So in a few words, maybe you know Elinor Ostrom, who's a Nobel Prize for economics, who work on commons and natural commons. And what she says is you can reach a solution only at local levels. We try to get solutions at larger levels, it doesn't work. So it's proven. And the other thing about climate crisis, so except from the local level, is the two main components of it also have been researched since the 70s by Dennis and Donella Meadows from the Club of Rome. And their model said that there are two ways out of these limits. Is out of oil, using less oil and less fossil fuels. And the other one is organic farming and trees. and they wrote that in the 70s. So, and we, all the scientific evidence is there. So the question is, why are we still building large cities, large technological tools? And the answer probably is from our brains, is how the brain works, is we all want to have more and now. So it's very difficult for people to agree to have less and later. And that's a basic tool for survival. So when we talk about climate crisis, a lot of it is not who is responsible for what, or can we find an agreement, is how is our brain working? So I'm not very sure that the COVID crisis will solve it, because we are all in a survival mode. And if you are in a survival mode full of fear, your creative part of the brain cannot express itself. So that's why I would say that climate crisis is less likely to be solved in a clever manner right now. So we will just have to adapt to what's happening.
I'd like to come to you, Karen, in a moment for a last word, because we should probably wind up. But I do think there has been a huge shift in consciousness even in the last couple of years, and maybe it's more evident here than where you are. But because France is more advanced in certain ways on these issues than Ireland is, but there is a shift in awareness and in the knowledge of the need for action. There's a thank you in from one of our viewers. A very good discussion. Thank you all, and let's hope for some positive change. So, Karen, do you think that COVID has? I mean, you spoke earlier. You said that it had created opportunities. So maybe you feel you've already answered that question.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it depends on who you speak to and where they're at and how COVID has affected them. And yes, let's be very clear that there are people in absolute survival mode already feeling very overwhelmed. On top of the overwhelm we were feeling about the climate crisis anyway, because again, even before COVID ever hit, and whilst we had everything from the legend that is David Attenborough and all the productions that brought the matter like into our sitting rooms, or the messaging that was coming out, the teaching that's been done in schools, there was also a lot of surveys came out to show that people wanted to do more but didn't know how, or the messaging was very, very confusing. So like you take that degree of overwhelm and add a global pandemic and all the fears and uncertainties and insecurities and, you know, financial and worries that come on top of it, like, no wonder people can't take action. So here's the thing. We need to stop thinking about the different crises independently of each other. The thing is, I really want to use words that were used so beautifully in the film, but I can't say it with a French accent, so I'm not going to try with a Cork one. But like, if we don't stop, like, and we all need to just get on board with that statement, and instead of it being crisis this, crisis that, crisis the other, look at the common. And I'm not trying to simplify it. I understand it's massive and complex, but actually, when you come down to it, there are common themes and there are common solutions across all of them. And how we eat and what we eat and how it is produced and how we mind it and not waste it, how we respect it, what we pay for it, who we eat with, like, that is a commonality across the board. So I think that for very understandable reasons, COVID has taken our attention elsewhere. But I think we have to gently, but firmly remind people that as we're dealing with this, some of the solutions to dealing with COVID will also apply to climate and so on and so forth. So
I could finish on a positive note in saying that, I mean, one of the things, the science was there about climate for going back 40 years, but the scientists weren't listened to. And one of the things we've learned about COVID is that we have had to listen to the scientists and to be guided by their knowledge and their wisdom at times. The efficacy of science has been elevated through the COVID crisis, the importance of it. So thanks, really great to meet you all. And thanks for our viewers. We can't see you, but thanks for sending in your comments and thanks for watching. A big thank you to Hélène Medic, the director of the film, and the big boule boss, as we say here, and to Ferme d'Avenir and the organization who inspired the film. Thank you all, and thanks to the organizers personally, to Cy Edwards, who's kind of organizing the technical he's organizing the technical aspects of this whole production, and to Elisabetta Sabatini from the French Embassy, from the Culture and Communications wing of the French Embassy, for putting this together. There's more events happening in this French festival. Cy is going to put up the link. It's ambafrance.fr. I think you'll find the link there, hopefully in your chat, to there's at least 4 other events happening, 2 or 3 films, and a free event called Spread My Wings. So please join that. Thanks all, and Cy has posted that link for the future events, and best wishes to you all. Thank you. Good night.
See the change. Brilliant.